The Battle of Stalingrad was one of the deadliest battles in history. But what were the most famous moments? What are the stories behind them? And why do they matter today? I'm the host. This is a World War II special episode on the Battle of Stalingrad. Let's jump into the 5 most famous battles of Stalingrad. Number 5, the Battle of the Mamayv Kurgan. The Mamayv Kurgan was the key to Stalingrad. It was the high ground overlooking much of the city. And if the Germans could take it, they could bomb the city with artillery and mortars for weeks without fear of Soviet counter-battery fire. By late November, the Soviets had dug into the low ground on 3 sides of the Mamayv Kurgan. The only approach was a narrow strip of land along a railroad line. On November, the German 29th Mountain Division attacked, but they didn't get very far. The next day, the 3rd Mountain Division attacked from the south. Again, they did not make it. On December, the German infantry finally managed to break through to the summit, but they were immediately attacked by Soviet tanks. By nightfall, the Soviets had taken back most of the mountain. Over the next 2 weeks, both sides fought bitterly over every inch of the mountain, but neither side could dislodge the other. In the end, the Battle of the Mamayv Kurgan ended in a stalemate. The Germans would never try to take the mountain again. 4. Operation Uranus. Operation Uranus was the Soviet plan to encircle and capture the German army in Stalingrad. The first phase of the operation began on November with a massive artillery barrage. Thousands of guns fired for hours on German positions. Then the Soviets launched their attack. By November, the Soviets had advanced 6 miles on the northern prong of their pincers and 12 miles on the southern prong. The Germans were in trouble. They desperately tried to stop the Soviet advance, but they couldn't. On November, Stalin ordered the troops to halt so that the supply lines could catch up. If he had let the troops keep advancing, they might have been able to encircle the entire German force. But Stalin was afraid to commit more troops to the battle. He believed that the Germans were about to surrender, and he didn't want to lose any more men. So he called off the offensive on November. The Germans had time to regroup and dig in. The Soviet troops who had been racing towards Stalingrad were ordered to halt. Many of the soldiers saw this order as a betrayal. They had come so close to victory, and now they were being pulled back. Some of the soldiers refused to obey. Small groups of men broke away from their units and charged forward. A few made it to the outskirts of Stalingrad. Others were killed or captured. And now for number 3. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. 3. The German surrender at Stalingrad. After 4 months of fighting, the German troops in Stalingrad were exhausted and demoralized. They had lost all hope of being relieved by their comrades, and with the Red Army closing in, they knew that they were trapped. On February 2, 1943, the German commander, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, met with the Soviet commander, General Vasily Chuikov, to discuss the terms of the surrender. The Germans laid down their arms, and the Red Army entered the city. Over the next few days, the Soviets rounded up the German troops and marched them to prison camps. Only a handful of Germans escaped. This was a major victory for the Soviet Union. Not only had they captured one of Germany's most important cities, but they had also dealt a severe blow to German morale. The news of the surrender spread quickly around the world, and it gave the Allies hope that they could win the war. 2. The Battle of the Railway Station. The railway station at Stalingrad was one of the most important transportation hubs in the city. It was also one of the most heavily defended. The Germans built several large buildings around the station to serve as barracks for their troops. These buildings were made of concrete and steel and were designed to withstand heavy artillery fire. The Soviets needed to capture the station in order to supply their troops fighting in the city. On August 23, 1942, the Red Army launched an attack on the railway station. The battle was fierce and lasted for several hours. The Soviets finally captured the station, but at a great cost. The Battle of the Railway Station was one of the turning points of the Battle of Stalingrad. It showed that the Soviets were capable of taking on the German war machine and winning. This victory gave the Soviets the confidence they needed to launch their final assault on the city. Number 1. The House on the Hill. The House on the Hill was the site of the last German defense in the Battle of Stalingrad. It was a large building with thick walls that overlooked the city. The Germans had turned it into a fortress, complete with machine gun nests and barbed wire. The Soviets needed to capture the building in order to gain a foothold in the city. On September 13, 1942, the Red Army launched an attack on the house on the hill. The battle was one of the most intense of the war. The Soviets fought their way to the top of the hill and captured the building. They then began to clear out the remaining Germans. The Battle of the House on the Hill was a major victory for the Soviet Union. It gave them control of the city and marked the beginning of the end for the German army. There are many more stories that could have been included in this list, such as the Battle of the Tractor Plant or the Battle of the Grain Elevator. But these are some of the most important, and they help us understand why the Battle of Stalingrad was such a turning point in World War II. The Battle of Stalingrad was fought between the German and Soviet forces from August 1942 to February 1943. It was one of the bloodiest battles in history, with an estimated 2 million casualties. The battle is considered to be a turning point in World War II. It marked the first time that the Germans had been defeated in battle. It also showed that the Soviet Union was a major player in the war. Before Stalingrad, the Germans had been winning battle after battle. They had taken over much of Europe and were on the verge of conquering the Soviet Union. But at Stalingrad they met their match. The Soviet troops were determined to defend their homeland, and they fought with a ferocity that the Germans had not seen before. The German troops were exhausted and demoralized. They had been fighting for years and had suffered heavy losses. When they finally met the Red Army, they knew that they were in trouble. The Germans surrendered on February 1943. This was a major victory for the Soviet Union. It showed that the Germans could be beaten, and it gave the Soviets the confidence they needed to push on and win the war. If you want to learn more about the Battle of Stalingrad, I recommend checking out the following resources. First, I would recommend watching the documentary The Battle of Stalingrad by the BBC. This is a really well-made documentary that covers all aspects of the battle. It includes interviews with historians and experts, as well as archival footage. Next, I would recommend reading the book Siege and City by Antony Beevor. This is a very detailed account of the battle from start to finish. Beevor is a great writer, and he really brings the battle to life. Finally, I would recommend visiting the Museum of the Battle of Stalingrad. This museum is located in Russia, and it has a huge collection of artifacts from the battle. If you can't visit the museum in person, you can also check out their website. I'll include a link to it in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new. If you did, please hit the like button. It really helps me out. I also want to say thank you to our supporters. Your support makes it possible for me to produce these videos. If you would like to support, please check out the links in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.